So, as you might imagine, as a Jehovah's Witness, you spend a fair amount of time knocking on strangers' doors, and that yields some pretty crazy stories. This was a typical icebreaker as a Jehovah's Witness. If things get dull in the car while you're traveling to a new territory for doors to knock on, a good icebreaker is always, what's your craziest field service experience? I put to you, dear viewer, that I have the craziest field service experience of all time, uncontested, and this is a story with two twists. So this is a video about the craziest field service experience of all time. Our journey begins in 2016, a dark time in America to be sure. But things were going pretty well for me. I had just started attending a new congregation, which I had moved to at the request of the circuit overseer. I had asked him which congregations I could go to in the area that might need help from a ministerial servant, since I had some ability to help out with things in the congregation, and he recommended this congregation, which we'll call the good congregation. I'm new there. I've only really been there a month or two, and I'm also a new pioneer, which means I need to get 70 hours of field service per month, and I'm also a bad pioneer, which means I am often very behind on my time and freaking out and wondering how I can possibly get 70 hours a month. So at the conclusion of the midweek meeting, the chairman announces that there is going to be a meeting in the back of the hall for people who would be interested in working underworked territory or seldom worked territory. This is a thing within the religion, if you're unfamiliar, where, obviously we knock on doors. Really populated areas, we knock on a lot of doors, but more rural areas where there's less congregations and less Jehovah's Witnesses, the territory gets worked very seldom, hence the name. But it's seen as something of a privilege to be able to do that, and I needed a bunch of time, so I said, yes, I will do that. At this meeting is one Sister Jones, part of the Jones family, who's very nice. I'm very familiar with them. Not really their name. Names have been changed to protect the innocent. She's older. She needs a ride. Now, I have not really met older Sister Jones, but I also haven't met a lot of people in the congregation because I'm new there and introverted, which is why I started a YouTube channel. That makes sense in my brain somewhere. Older Sister Jones, as you might know by her name, is older, and she raises her hand as we're making, arrangements that she needs a ride. Now, this is seldom worked territory, so this is, to my memory, 1.5 to 2 hours away. A little bit far, but I am a little goody two-shoes trying to make a good impression on the new congregation and be super helpful and do everything and make my daddy proud, which I said is a joke, but that's true. I say, older Sister Jones, I will drive you to the Kingdom Hall. That's 1.5 hours away. We're going to call this the bad congregation. As far as I know, there's nothing wrong with this congregation. It's just far away. And if you ask me, anything that's not in my immediate vicinity is an inconvenience and therefore bad. She's very happy, and so is her family. They approach me after the meeting, and they're like, oh, thank you so much for being willing to pick her up. This is a Thursday, and the Seldom Worked Territory event is going to be on Saturday. So I get the contact information for older Sister Jones from her family, who are very excited and happy and thankful that I am picking her up and taking her to the ministry, and I think to myself, I'm such a good guy. The next day, Friday, I am coming back home from the gym. I only mention that because that was a time in my life when I went to the gym, and it makes me feel cool and powerful to say it. I don't go to the gym anymore. I'm a schlub. That's what I call a historical brag. Hey, I used to take care of myself. I am driving to my house, and I get a phone call from a number that I don't recognize, and it is older Sister Jones. And I think, yay, older Sister Jones is going to cancel and say she can't do it because I secretly don't want to wake up super early to pick her up and then drive 2 hours to a distant congregation. Actually, I don't really want to go at all anymore, and I'm thinking of canceling, and the only reason why I'm still going is because I have to pick up older sister Jones. She is not calling me to cancel. She is calling me to once again thank me for picking her up, therefore boosting my ego. I know I just came back from the gym. I have this, runner's high, these endorphins, but now I have compliment endorphins rushing through me, and those are even more powerful. And she's going on about how, this is so great. You are truly a golden light in the world. Your daddy will be so proud. However, also, there is something weird going on with the property of my house, my residence, and I need to borrow around $300. And I, in my car, say, uh-oh. So I'm kind of scrambling, and I just tell her calmly, I'm sorry, older sister Jones. I also would love to have $300, but I am poor, so I cannot help you there. I'm very sorry. I'm still willing to pick you up for service. But she's quite insistent and brings it up a few times, and she kind of brought it up in a manipulative way. She did the compliment sandwich, where she complimented me, compliment endorphins rising, asked for money, that's the meat of the sandwich, and then last piece of bread, more compliments. This is a very dangerous sandwich. As one might imagine, I no longer feel super comfortable picking up older sister Jones because I'm thinking, wait a minute, she just asked me for money, in fact, quite a bit of money, and I also don't know this person, so this might get even worse. Stay tuned. Dear viewer, I kid you not, I called every single elder in the congregation whose number I had, and I got 0 replies. Nobody answered their phone. Nobody returned my call. The entire evening. They were probably all in the same elders meeting, which, that would make sense. But I found out later that no, there actually wasn't an elders meeting, and they all just separately were like, it's a Friday night. Not dealing with that. I did leave a message on a couple of their voicemails saying, like, hey, I'm a little concerned about something. Please call me back ASAP. And somebody did call me back, but it was like while I was on the way there the next day. And as you will soon find, that was too late. Now, typically, my last line of defense when I don't know what to do, this is past 2016 Uber JW Jake, is I would ask my dad, who's an elder, for advice. And he and my mom were on vacation, so I couldn't, and I tried, and he also did not answer me. So I didn't know how to call a sweet old lady and tell her, hey, you made me feel weird by asking for money, and now I'm not going to help you out with your whole field service plans. Sorry, bye. I didn't know how to do that, so I just woke up early the next morning, hoping some elder would call me and giving me permission to cancel on her, and that did not happen, which I took as a sign from Jehovah because I prayed about it, and I said, please tell me what to do. I said my last line of defense was my dad. I guess it was God, but a psychiatrist might have some fun untangling whether or not those things are really different in my head. So I pick her up. It does take a while. She uses a walker, and, she needed some help getting down the stairs. So she gets in the car. We start driving, and she starts talking seemingly the instant she closes the door and does not stop for the remainder of the 2 hours. This is my favorite conversation that I've ever had with anybody, by which I mean she talked for 2 hours, and I listened in utter amazement at the things that she had to say. Now, older sister Jones is not like most people that exist in this universe anyway. We make the general small talk, by which I mean I managed to ask her one question, which is, so, hi. And she tells me, I am a traveling storyteller. That is what I do. I promote and further education, and I'm the traveling storyteller. She was not a traveling storyteller. I should correct myself. She is the traveling storyteller. She tells me that she is the traveling storyteller, and I don't question this too much because I remember growing up as a young boy who loved going to the library, and at times there were storytellers there, and you could go there for story time, and there'd be some sweet little old lady reading a story in front of a group of kids, and I just assumed that that's what she did. No, I asked, oh, okay, so you work in a library? No, I am a traveling storyteller. That was meant to clarify. Only more questions were raised in my brain. Beyond being a traveling storyteller, she actually is a writer and a t-shirt designer. And these two things were always said in conjunction with each other. In fact, I do believe that t-shirt designer was always said last, like to make sure that that's the most interesting thing about her. She was not at the time wearing a t-shirt that she had designed. Did she later? Stay tuned. You see, older sister Jones had apparently recently accomplished something that I personally dreamt of, which was writing a children's book. In fact, writing several children's books, which were illustrated and published, and they're getting great reviews on Amazon and on YouTube. And I thought, a book on YouTube, that sounds not so much like a thing that I've heard of, but I didn't have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions at that time. Her books were all about 3 characters who were little animals, cats and dogs, 2 dogs and 1 cat, I should say. Now, the main character was Rolifio, which is a great name, and it has a great backstory. This was the name of one of her dogs, and she named him Rolifio because he rolled in the leaves. Rolifio. And I still think to this day, that is great, and genuinely, a kid would find that delightful, and it should be published in a book. Maybe I'll plagiarize it. Who's going to tell her? Just kidding. We will find out that she is actually quite familiar with the law, and specifically property zoning issues. She has Rolifio. She has Jazzy. There might have been a name or a backstory to why the other dog's name was Jazzy, but the most important thing to know about Jazzy was that she had recently designed a stuffed animal of Jazzy, of her famous book character. And you're thinking, Jake, who cares? Every children's book character has a stuffed animal. I'm unimpressed. Don't bother going on. I say, give me 1 second. Her big pitch to me was that this was the first stuffed animal Cocker Spaniel in orange. That pause was part of the experience for me when she told it to me, so I tried to reenact it for you. She tells me that this is the first Cocker Spaniel stuffed animal, and I thought, that doesn't sound right. And then she said, in orange, and I thought, yeah, I guess maybe. Seems like a hard thing to research. And the third character, which she mentioned kind of offhandedly, is Fluffy, the cat. I always loved the detail that the cat was just named Fluffy. Like, Rolifio has this really clever name that has an origin story and everything. And Jazzy doesn't have an origin story, but it's still a fun name that a child would love. And then Fluffy, just like the most generic cat name that is the name of every cat in every children's book. If I had to guess, she's a dog person. Now, she had a mission statement. This is not a thing that most people have at the ready to just say to people who they're getting a ride from. But older sister Jones was different, and I wrote this down because it was important to me. I was writing many things down in my head as she's telling me these things. I'll pause here. Is it really fair to make a video making fun of an old lady who is just a traveling storyteller trying her best? And that's for you to decide. I would remind you that this is an old lady who hopes and prays every day that Armageddon will come and kill all the gay people and replace the world with only Jehovah's Witnesses. Is that person worthy of some gentle ribbing, perhaps? Watch on. Mission statement. It was as follows, and I was able to remember this. You might think, oh, wow, you must have a great memory because you just heard it that once, and you remembered to write it down 2 hours later when you got to the hall. No. I have a terrible memory. I remembered it because she said it many times. Our mission. And she did say our a lot throughout this entire process, and it gave me the impression that there was a bit of a team involved because she had an illustrator for her books and somebody who was apparently filming promotional material for YouTube. Oh, she also, this is important, I'm sorry I interrupted the mission statement for this, but she told me that she was also recently featured in a newspaper in Arizona. which was wild to me, but hey, she's a traveling storyteller. I guess she traveled to Arizona and met the mayor. The mayor was part of it, and she said that she got her story in the newspaper, and, I didn't have the opportunity to double-check any of this. Will we do so later in the video? Will it corroborate many of the things she says? Stay tuned. Our mission is to touch the hearts and minds of all people through positive, inspirational thoughts and to promote education that will enhance their lives and personal values. That is a lot of ways to say nothing at all, or to just describe education generally. She was very passionate about education and talked about how we have to keep education going. Like, one of her t-shirt designs, because she told me all about the t-shirt designs, was "Education is here to stay," which implies that education generally as a concept was going somewhere, blown away with the leaves, rolling away with the leaves. I was intrigued by this. I had no reason to question it until she started to get into some of her poetry. You see, she didn't list this in her bio when she was telling me that she was a writer and traveling storyteller. She is also a recording artist and recorded multiple albums of spoken word poetry. And I had the pleasure of listening to this poetry. You might think it must be difficult to appreciate poetry without there being a beat. She had thought of this. She started tapping on the window of the car. She also was doing a lot of this. A lot of the, executive trying to pitch an idea, get in the zone. She snapped to no particular meter that I could discern. And you might have trouble believing this, but it seemed a little bit like some of this was made up on the spot. There's a lot of just about, the rain falls down, the sky up above. None of it rhymed. But occasionally, you would, she'd be, bebopping along, snapping, banging the window, talking about the street that drives by in the car that I'm looking out of. The rain falls down, wet puddles, sky up above, mobile homes, Arizona, and how we mourn for those who died in 9/11. And there would just be some crazy moment where she would just drop in something like 9/11 or a recent shooting or Martin Luther King Jr. And it really did feel like she had planned out a 2-hour-long monologue to deliver to me specifically, because she would be telling these stories that didn't really seem to be going anywhere. And she would say, "I was defrauded out of my home through purely illegal means, and that's how I lost my dog, Relifio." This is a big thing. She's very hung up on the fact that she was defrauded out of her home. But the mayor looked into it and determined that, yes, in fact, it was fraud, and her neighbor lied, told an untruth, I believe she said. This lie that involved the bigness of her dog and the smallness of her mobile home resulted in her losing her dog, which is very sad and isn't funny. But she'd be telling me this story, and, her voice would begin to rise and, reach a pitch, and she'd say, "And my home was taken away from me, and I was worried I was homeless, and then I thought to myself," and then she would start snapping, and then she would go into a poem, and it was really quite remarkable. She told me many things. She told me about her t-shirt collection, and these were very specific descriptions of t-shirts. Many of them seemed to just be descriptions of her books, but just on a t-shirt. And some of them had the words from some of her poems. Education is forever. What was it? Education is here to stay. A lot of it were things like just generally, education is good. The kids have to learn because they're the future. She really did get into kids being the future a lot. And you know what? No disagreements there. I got no truck with that. Or beef. I think if you have a truck with something, that means you are with it because you hitch yourself to the truck. Sound off in the comments. She also would go on to tell me about a lot of her books, one of which, and this makes sense, is her characters, Relifio, Jazzy, and Fluffy, learning the alphabet. And this book, she tells me, is 85 pages. And I would think to myself, there are only 26 letters in the alphabet, so what are we doing with all of these other pages? How long do they each individually have to learn the alphabet? I do think she sprinkled in that there were occasionally some blank pages in the book for, the kids to write in, which, you got to boost the page count somehow. I'm a content creator. I get it, girl. The best title is The Invisible Woman from Within Blossoms into what? Storyteller, t-shirt designer, and writer. That is the title of one of her books. She also apparently wrote a children's book about the fact that she was defrauded out of her mobile home because of a lie or an untruth from her neighbor. And it was something about a rock garden. Don't quote me on that. So after 2 hours of me saying nothing at all for the first time in my life, just having listened to this astounding yet exhausting list of things, we get to the Kingdom Hall. And we have a meeting for service. And of course, they're making arrangements for who's going to work with who. And I made it a point to say, if you need to split us up, that's fine. I can work by myself. Because, I didn't mention this, but, one of the reasons why you might go to another hall as a witness is because you might want to meet a lady or a fella or, a reliefio, a jazzy type, a fluffy, if you're into that kind of thing. And I don't recall there being any, lookers or anything. Lookers. I'm like a cad from the 1920s. Oh, she's a real looker. I walked in with a trilby hat, a long coat, a cane, a gigantic cigar, a newspaper. Inevitably, I am put in the same service group with older Sister Jones. The day of service, I have to say, was a complete blur. Usually fun service stories is I knocked on somebody's door and they had a gun or, something crazy. And I have plenty of stories like that, minus the guns. Regrettably, nobody ever pulled a gun on me. I'm sorry, I'm lame. The thing that did make me feel better, I worked with a nice family, and that was great. And we had, brought lunches as well. So, we, ate lunch and also went out in the afternoon. The thing that made me feel a lot better was that she did repeat a lot of these same stories to the people in the car so that I could at least have witnesses twice over, because they're Jehovah's Witnesses, to the fact that I witnessed these things. You might be thinking, well, I'm just taking your word for it. This sounds like the craziest thing I've ever heard. Stay tuned. The way back was more of the same, but I had gained some confidence. And I got the sense that if I had a follow-up question, she would have an amazing answer. And that was true. I failed to mention this, but on the way there, I learned about her history of rather remarkable celebrity encounters. She had her t-shirts featured on Oprah's show, The Oprah. So on the way back, I asked some follow-up questions like, wow, because she would just tell the same stories again. I don't want to say that she was repeating them over and over again in kind of some manic way, like an insane person. She was very passionate about this and told them in a very naturalistic way. But she would occasionally, if I had been featured on the Oprah show, that would be all I'd ever talk about. So she brought it up a few times, and I did ask her, so those shirts were featured on Oprah? She's like, well, they didn't make it all the way to the TV, but we sent them in, and, we did get a response from Oprah. I was like, Oprah wrote you a letter back about these t-shirts? It's amazing. And she's like, well, I don't know if it was Oprah specifically. And there was always, as you would ask follow-up questions, it would be whittled down to the fact that, I attempted to send a shirt to Oprah one time, and it didn't go great. She also told me that she had wrote poetry to be read at some kind of ceremony for Michelle Obama. This, very sadly, turned out to be less than true, an untruth, as older Sister Jones might say. So the way back, I'm just asking all these questions and just having a good old time. She tells me many more poems, about many more t-shirt designs, about Reliefio, Jazzy, her albums, where I can buy them, how many stars I should give it on Amazon, 5, and the fact that she has a YouTube presence that is really doing well. So I make it home and just kind of sit there alone thinking, what? The next day at the meeting, a couple elders come up to me and say, hey, sorry, I saw that you called on Friday. Hope you didn't need anything. And I was like, yeah, actually, I did need some help. I tell the one elder who is a real buddy of mine, he's a young guy, really funny, cool guy, which means he'll probably wake up in a few years. So, hey, Darren, if you're watching this, I like you. I tell him this, and he's like, older sister Jones? You took her out in service, like, to the seldom work territory? And I was like, yeah, she was, she went back to that meeting. And he says, oh, yeah, she doesn't go here. Apparently, all this business about the mayor of Arizona and being in the newspaper in Arizona is because she lives in Arizona, and her storytelling had merely traveled her to the Columbus, Ohio area to hang out with her family for like a week or two, and then fly back on the umbrella whence she came. That is twist number one. That this entire crazy ordeal from having to wake up super early, pick up a stranger who would ask me for hundreds of dollars and endure many stories did not, in fact, go to our hall. The next day was a big congregation get-together, and she came. And she was wearing a custom t-shirt, and it was, in fact, the education is here to stay orange shirt complete with all three animals, Relifio, Jazzy, and Fluffy. She also had a bag full of goodies. These goodies included books and, I believe, albums. She was attempting to give her merch to people. And at the time, I found this crass, and, these days I'm like, we all gotta hustle out there. Get it. This is a lot. I understand. A great deal to take in. It's also so absurd that you might think, how could this be true? Surely some of this is exaggerated. And this brings us to twist number two, which is that another thing that she had not exaggerated about is that she does have a YouTube channel.
The three animals that you see here is my character trademark animals. The black and white dog is Rolifio. He was my dog in real life. I adopted him in Columbus, Ohio. Then there comes the Cocker Spaniel. That was my son's dog. I have recently designed the world's first stuffed animal, Cocker Spaniel, in orange. Everybody's raving about it. They want all my animals, stuffed animals, to be in the arms of our precious children, along with their pal, Fluffy the cat.
I present this not for the purpose of making fun of this old lady who clearly is having some things going on in her life, merely to prove that I am not a liar. Since the channel started, I wanted to tell this story, and I really debated doing it because I just am like, is it cool and chill to, tell a story that kind of makes fun of an old lady? And the reality is, this story really happened. She really said those things. I don't know what to tell you. It's just true, and sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and that's what we're here to promote today, is a 2006 Will Ferrell film, Stranger Than Fiction. Anyway, that is my craziest field service story. Oh, another thing. I was working out in service with a sister in a congregation a couple weeks later, and I was telling her this story, and I thought, I've got the greatest story of all time. And I'm telling this, and she's just kind of nodding like, and I'm like, okay, wait, you're not surprised by this at all. And she's like, oh, yeah, I have the albums. She's given us the albums. And friends, she really did record studio quality albums of her reciting that poetry. Please like and subscribe, and if you like the channel, there's a Patreon.
5 years later, I wrote this. Please allow me, for today is 9/11, and we must not forget our loved ones. In memory of our loved ones who have lost their precious lives. In memory of all our loved ones, our precious children that were lost, our parents, policemen, the firemen, workmates, men, women, passerby, all who lost their life on 9/11. This also includes the precious loss of lives Yes, those who died in the past, such as those in the Holocaust.